part of the founding narrative or the founding myth of DeepMind and OpenAI and Anthropic is these problems are real. So we need to get there first so that we can handle it responsibly. Those are, I think, the big two reasons, but then I can go on. There's lots more reasons as well. So one thing is, World War III, geopolitical conflict. If AI does in fact get incredibly powerful, that's going to change the balance of power between nations. That's going to disrupt a lot of things. That puts us at increased risk of crisis more generally, right? Another one, what about those jobs? You're going to lose your taxi job, but not just the taxi driver, everybody, pretty much. There might be a few exceptions, like people whose jobs for legal reasons are only allowed to be done by humans. But for the most part, everybody should be afraid that their jobs are going to be lost, even if we manage to avoid all the other problems, right?
This narrative has started to emerge, and I've had several interviews on this show where I've interviewed people who are very, very scared and anxious about AI. And these are people that have worked in the industry for sometimes decades.
Yeah.
The counter narrative coming over the hill is that this is doomerism, that these people are, for whatever reason, just trying to scare people and that they don't really understand what they're talking about. How do you respond to that sort of counter narrative? And you must have seen this emerging yourself, especially from people who stand to benefit, dare I say.
Yeah, exactly. This counter narrative is fairly recent and it's been pushed by the people who stand to benefit from it. And it's not true. Like these concerns have been around for decades, since before the AI industry existed. They're actually pretty reasonable concerns. Like if you take the companies at their word and imagine that they are in fact going to build superintelligence, well, it raises a lot of questions, like who's going to control it? Will anybody control it? What about the jobs? These are just kind of obvious implications to be thinking about and worrying about.
Who are you and what's your story?
My name is Daniel Cocotello. I currently run the AI Futures Project, which is a small nonprofit that mostly focuses on forecasting the future of AI. Before that, I worked at OpenAI.
AI forecasting?
Yeah. So think about how industry analysts who work for hedge funds and stuff will make these forecasts of like, here's, how many cars Tesla will be selling 5 years from now, or like, here's what the price of electricity will be in 2 years, right? That's forecasting. I was doing that, but specifically focused on AI. The reason I was doing it is because it's incredibly important to see where this is all headed.
Why did you go to OpenAI? What did you do there? What did you observe while you were there? And how did it change your perspective on the future of AI, but also, I guess, OpenAI as a company? And for anybody that doesn't know, OpenAI are the company that produced ChatGPT.
Yeah, so I went to OpenAI in 2022. A large part of what I did there was more forecasting. AI 2027 is a scenario that you may have heard of. I did like smaller, lower effort versions of them internally for just internal circulation of like, here's some guesses as to what the next couple of years might look like. I also worked on evaluations for dangerous capabilities. So, trying to measure the AI's cyber abilities or persuasion abilities or situational awareness. And I also briefly was on a capabilities team doing reinforcement learning to create agents. AI is in fact getting a lot better, and I can say more about why. Scaling laws, deep neural nets, bigger, trained on more data, become more efficient, more competent at those things. I also became a bit more disillusioned with the AI industry. So OpenAI, Anthropic, and DeepMind all had these sort of founding narratives of like, yes, these risks are real, but we've thought about them and we're going to try to handle them responsibly. And that's why it's important for us to keep doing what we're doing. And I increasingly came to think that these were rationalizations to justify what they were doing rather than sort of like deeply guiding their actual behavior, and that when push comes to shove, they'll follow their incentives rather than do what's actually good.
So you're inside OpenAI at the time, and you start to believe that they're following commercial incentives versus the, I guess, social or societal incentives that they founded themselves on.
Sort of. I mean, I wouldn't actually describe it as commercial incentives. I think I would describe it as power-seeking incentives. So, like, it's true that the companies care a lot about making a lot of money, but especially at the very top of these companies, like the leaders, they understand that this is about more than just money. There are these emails that came up in, the lawsuit between Musk and OpenAI. A bunch of emails were surfaced in that lawsuit, which you can go read. And in some of them, the founders of OpenAI were talking back in like 2017 about how the reason why we made OpenAI was because we were worried that Demis Hassabis at Google was going to become dictator with AGI. Even back then, they were This is obviously about more than just money. Like these powerful CEOs are literally afraid that if the other guy gets there first, he might become dictator. And they don't trust each other. And so that's why they are racing as hard as they can so that they're the ones who get there first, so to speak.
Have you met Sam Altman?
Yeah.
And did that shape your opinion of his incentives or why he's doing what he's doing? Because there's a lot, speculated about what his incentives are. I mean, his most recent narrative says for the good of humanity. I think that's what.
Yeah, I mean, I think the main thing I've learned is don't pay attention to the narratives. What they say to one person is just different from what they can say to some other person at the same time. And what they say in public is a third thing entirely. I think you should judge people by their actions, not by their words.
And why are you no longer at OpenAI?
Largely for the reason that I mentioned. So I became gradually disillusioned with how the company was going to behave. For example, when I first joined in 2022, at least to the people I talked to, my colleagues at the company, there was this general sense of like, of course, we wouldn't actually just build superintelligence as soon as possible. Once we started getting really close, like once we started getting to AIs that could maybe automate the AI research process, we would pause and figure out how to make it safe. That's because we're the good guys, and that's obviously the safe thing you should do rather than just going full speed ahead. But we're worried about other people who might not pause, our competitors, Google, for example. And so that's why we need to be in the lead so that we have that room to do the safe stuff, right? That was sort of like a thing that seemed like maybe like the median position or something among the colleagues I talked to when I was there when I started, including people like Sam, including the leadership. And then by the time I left, I was like, oh man, they're really not going to do that, are they? Like they've sort of, partly because this has become more politicized and they've become bigger and been under more scrutiny, people have started asking, like, why are you doing this in the first place if it's so risky? And so they've pivoted their narrative to being more like, actually, it's not that risky, And so, yeah, I mean, it seems like they're just going to keep going roughly as fast as they can and hope that they can figure it out on the way.
How did your time at OpenAI come to an end?
I resigned in 2024. I had a nice goodbye party.
What were the reasons you gave for quitting OpenAI?
I thought that we were rationalizing too much and that we needed to think more about what would actually be good for the world. I wanted more freedom to publish. So at OpenAI, as it became a bigger company, it became more of a normal tech company with incentives and, a PR department and things like that. And so it started becoming more difficult to publish the sort of research that I was doing. For example, those scenarios that I mentioned, couldn't publish those, right? They're just for internal use. I thought that was a shame because right now, most of the world is kind of asleep at the wheel and doesn't really realize what's going on with AI and doesn't really realize what's coming in the pipeline a couple of years from now. And the companies aren't really incentivized to tell people that much about it.